Hi, everybody. This is Conrad Ackerman, CEO here at Agile IT. Welcome for another Agile IT Tech Talk. Today's subject is security in the modern world. Excited to have with us Rich Carlsen from Microsoft. He's a Microsoft solution architect. I'll let him kind of intro himself and talk a little and kind of lead us through the discussion. One of the reasons why we wanted to bring up this topic is that security is such a big, broad area. It covers every single thing that we do, including when we walk in through doors, when we access our workstations, when we send files. It's everywhere. But there's some kind of core components, especially when you look at an infrastructure perspective, that we always have to be mindful of. Sometimes we neglect it. So Rich will talk about some of this, but there's also some really cool things happening in Azure that allows us to better understand what's happening for security in our world. So with that, Rich, I'll turn it over to you, the intro, and kind of take it away.
Okay. Share my screen out here. Oops. Okay, everybody. My name is Rich Carlsen. I'm a cloud solutions architect at Microsoft. I focus on applications and infrastructure, which pretty much covers most of the landscape of Azure IaaS and Azure Platform as a Service. My industry experience, just to let you know, is industrial manufacturing primarily, pharmaceuticals, banking, warehousing and distribution, oil and gas, and software manufacturing. So I've seen a few industries, worked a lot in security and other areas. And so I have a real good background on it. Security fundamentals. Security is as easy as ABC. And right now what Microsoft has done is they've brought a lot of tools forward to you to use with the security practices baked in. And what we're doing is we're allowing you as the customer to take advantage of what we have learned in the business and basically eating out of our own lunchbox. And we're real happy to bring that to you. We have a few tools that are really easy to implement and actually very inexpensive. And they're Azure Security Center, Azure Backup, and Azure Site Recovery. Azure Security Center is a tool that it'll inspect your environment and make a lot of security recommendations to you, and even let you implement some of the security measures through the tool. And it has a very compelling user interface, so you don't have to get into the old receiving a lot of email alerts and having to react to that. What we've done is we've made a tool that has a user interface that's actually compelling and enjoyable to use. And as an everyday tool, a nice thing to pop up every morning, and it's just a wonderful thing to use. We also have Azure Backup. And Azure Backup is a very good tool as well for backing up it can do everything from backup your infrastructure on site to the cloud to your individual computer that you're carrying around. It's also a very, very good tool. And Azure Site Recovery. As you know, disaster recovery in the past has been a very complicated issue for most companies. Almost always it was limited to very, very large organizations like banks, etc., that had certain compliance restraints and or requirements, and they needed to do disaster recovery. And there was a lot of intellectual mind share required to do that, as well as a lot of capital in the expense for doing such a thing. Now site recovery is a point and click operation. To do disaster recovery. It just couldn't be easier, and it's cost effective, and it's available to everybody. And I really think that Azure Site Recovery is something that everybody should take a look at, and whether it's backing up your existing infrastructure on site to the cloud in case you have a disaster with your own infrastructure, or even your cloud. And it's just a great tool. For example, if you say, you can even back up from other clouds to Azure with Azure Site Recovery or failover too. So it's a wonderful tool. You can do test failovers. You can do all sorts of great things, and I really recommend that people take a look at that too. Okay, the Azure portal offers enterprise grade management. What we've done out here and everything around security, we look at security as not only intrusion protection, against brute force attacks and things like that. We also look at it just for a way to safeguard against accidental things or events that may happen. Like data is messed up in a data entry scenario, and you need to apply a backup to it. It can be that somebody accidentally changes a configuration that does backups, and so when you need a backup, it's not there, or somebody inadvertently just deletes a backup. And as you know, with Murphy's Law, you may need that backup, and that's the only time it's going to happen, when it's not there. So security is a big thing, and it really comes down to risks and known risks and the mitigations around them. And the mitigations is how you solve, you come up with a solution to the particular risk event happening, and be able to respond at it. So we have governance policies, we have security management and threat protection. And again, we covered disaster recovery, and then monitoring. Again, with Security Center, it is just a fantastic monitoring tool. And then also configuration for updates and automation, configuration, and also being able to respond. When something does happen, you can in advance put together your thought process and what you would want to do in that event, and have automation built around it so you can respond to an event happening. Okay, Security Center. I'm going to be doing a demo on Security Center today. With our 15 minutes, I really don't have a chance to go through backup and ASR, Azure Site Recovery, but it can be done in the future, and Agile IT are just absolute experts in this particular area, and I'm sure would be more than happy to walk you through these different systems and the practices that revolve around them. And again, Security Center is protection through best practices. Again, we're bringing forward all the things we do to secure our data centers to you. From a basic practice standpoint, and we're sharing the wealth, so you don't have to recreate the world as a security expert or security administrator in your organization. We detect threats and attacks, and we also have abilities to remediate issues. This is a real neat thing once you get everything up and running in your environment with Security Center and things implemented within your Azure environment around security, is we have a mobile app as well too. So you can we're always on the way home. Did I forget to do this? Did I do this? Did I do that? This is or how are things running? You get a phone call, and this enables you to react very quickly from anywhere. All you need is that cellular connection or a network connection, and it's available on the App Store and also Google Play. Okay, business continuity strategy. All three are important. High availability, your machines within your region. There's ways to configure for that. So if you need to maintenance on a machine that you don't have any lapsing coverage or services. Disaster recovery, again, you can fail over from regions to a secondary region with your core system, and doing that with a minimal footprint on your secondary region as it sits idle, and a really reduced cost to where it's not even an issue. And then also backup as well too. And I talked about backup, that once you get it up into Azure, it takes care of the rest for you. You don't have to have duplicate backup tapes or any of that kind of business. We're just replicating this across zones, etc. So all of the nice bells and whistles you get with Azure Storage come along with this, and again, a very easy to implement and really great tool. For example, I conducted a class, and part of the class was Azure Backup, and so in part of the demo, I backed up my my laptop, and I never turned it off. Yeah, I said, wow, that was easy. And now I know my backups are incrementally being taken care of all the time. It's just a great tool. Tools, Security Center demo. Let's get right into it and show you a little bit about Security Center. What I have here is my Azure subscription where I work. This is my sandbox. I am constantly tearing things up, tearing things down, trying to either resolve customer issues or learn on my own. And so I have just an immense amount of stuff running out here. Unless I'm focusing on security that day, I probably don't, this is non-production, I probably don't think too much about security. Everything that I do here is scratch. You know, I could delete this and not lose a hair on my head. So it's not really critical for me to do a lot of backups and that sort of thing, and implementation of patches and things like that, unless it's needed. And the reason I bring this up is because in development environments, you do want to implement a lot of the measures, backups, etc., that you would on premise, because if you do have an event happen, you know, it costs money if you're a development organization. From a phone call to not being able to work for an hour or a day, or have to reconfigure something or figure out how they did something before and make the same mistakes in doing it. I mean, it's extremely expensive for a development organization to have to rewind an environment once it's been unwound. And so there's certain measures that you want to focus on for your development environments as well too. And so I strongly recommend that, as well as production environments. They don't have to be to the same degree, but something to do. If you can see over here on the left-hand pane, there's Security Center. And with the exception of one virtual machine, I have made no configuration changes to any of my environment for this thing to run. And so you can see advanced threat protection. I really haven't turned that on from a severity standpoint right now. I really, you're not going to see anything here, but the rest is up and running. And so this is what I wanted to show you, just how easy it is to get up and running without any additional configuration. When you are getting started in Security Center, we have wizards that can walk you through, and documentation to get you started. Configuring a security policy, recommendations, ability to implement security recommendations, to understand your security health, get alerted to security threats, a way to walk through getting alerts going if you so wish them via email or whatever the avenue it may be. And again, documentations, we have forums on this, so you can benefit from others in your community that are using these tools with very common questions. You know, the old 80-20 rule. If you've got a question, probably 80% of the rest of the public does too, and you can find it on the forum. And there's a planning and operations guide as well. And there's an onboarding to advanced security. We have events. And this can tell you about health in Azure. But mainly I wanted to jump down to recommendations. As I showed you, I had this immense environment with all sorts of things going on. And you can see all of these recommendations coming across. So, you know, there's one thing to do is to run through security and make yourself a checklist of all the things you need to do and try to figure out how to do them. Or you can rely on the old 80-20 rule here, that we're going to let you know about most of the things that you should do. And it's more than an 80-20 rule here. It's probably a 99% rule. Most of the things that you're going to need are going to be recommended to you in this particular screen. And so if we go to compute and apps, I'm just going to show you a way to better make sense out of all this stuff. Here it's giving you different recommendations and what they're applying to. It boils the list down a little bit further and allows you to filter in. And here are 4 out of 4 web applications that I have need something. And here shows the 4 web applications. And so that's very, very handy. As well as you can go right to your VMs and computers and just go straight to your VMs and see what's going on with them. And here I have a development VM that I've created out on the system, and it has MySQL running onto it. And you can see what it's recommending right now, that I apply disk encryption, that I apply endpoint protection of the VMs, that I remediate 56 security configurations, and this is all really great stuff. And it tells you a little bit more about them. This is really nice. In cloud services, which I don't have any running out here, and app services is in preview. I do have app services running, and you can see beyond just my virtual machines, it's also doing it for my PaaS applications. And so these are some websites that I have up running, and some Azure functions, and it's giving me security recommendations for those as well. It also does it for networking. And as you can see, these are the virtual networks that I have out running right here. Right here, I have my development environment, and that's where I host a virtual machine here. And I run Visual Studio and things like that on it, so I don't have to pollute my own laptop computer. And it's very easy to just wipe this away and recreate it. Here you can see it's making some security recommendations as well too, at a network level, which is pretty cool. And this is at the subnet level right here. And it's asking me to implement network security groups on this particular subnet. So this is a really great one as well too. We have data and storage.
So Rich, this is actually a really good time because there's a question that here that I think there's a really good time to ask it. So with all this information that's collected here, how would a customer, not having this, how else would they get the same type of capability and services today?
Oh, well, right now it's a little more complex the other way around. You would have to use other tools. System Center Configuration Manager and System Center Operation Manager could be implemented on premise. The downfall of that is it's a huge implementation, again, servers and such, and domains and security that you have to maintain to be able to access these resources, and a learning curve implementing custom management packs in the instance of System Center Operations Manager. Huge learning curve, very expensive. You almost need an IT infrastructure unit just to run those tools. Here, as you can see, it's just up and running. There's nothing I had to do. And it's when you consider the difference between the two, this is just so far superior to the on-premise sort of implementations with traditional tools.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I mean, that's, we certainly do system center deployments for customers, and a lot of times they have a real need, right? Because sometimes they're managing resources that, let's say all the devices and things you're running are for a system that has to be behind a closed network, right? So you really can't use cloud services, or you have some other inherent need in your infrastructure that needs something like that. The nice thing about this is it really kind of goes towards the masses. And thinking about that, like the masses, right? Here's another question of, does everything need to be in Azure to use this, right? So this is great for in Azure, but man, we got a number of customers where, they're actually, maybe in Azure, sometimes they're not. So, what do you need to do to make that? Does this work in that environment?
Oh, yes, it works in that environment. And there's, for the example of the virtual machines, there's an agent running on the virtual machines, and for some of the advanced features. And you can monitor your on-premise environments as well as your cloud environments with this tool. And you can even monitor assets out in the AWS or Google Cloud as well too. So it's a very, very flexible tool. And again, reinforcing what you said about configuration manager and system center operations manager for certain environments. I've seen a lot of that where it is absolutely needed to have that on-premise implementation. And SCADA environments, industrial environments, which are inherently unsecure. And so what they prefer to do is to put the environment in a bubble, and completely obscured from the outside. And that's an example where those traditional products would come in very, very handy.
Right.
So,
And then,
but in most cases, this is the tool that you would want to use. So,
cool. So is this thing free or is it not free?
it's free up to a certain point where you start getting into advanced things. And I really like to defer the pricing to you as being the person who's actually selling this, because it varies.
I kind of teed up my own question there. Yeah, so yeah, there is a free capability that's available for really anybody that's using Azure infrastructure capability. So it's really only free if you're doing just in Azure, and even there it has some limitations. But there is additional pricing if you're doing on-prem nodes or if you want additional capabilities. So that's available in the pricing. That's something that in Agile IT you can reach out to us and kind of help you get all defined and set up, because it's one thing to just turn it on, right, and even put on-prem, but it's all the policies and rules that have to take place, and I think this kind of jumps into kind of the last question I have here around, how does this relate to Compliance Center and Security Center? So, is this the same thing?
No, Security Center will give you guidelines on compliance, and then through your using this tool through your policies. And compliance is where you would make the configurations to adhere to those. Because as you know, there are so many different compliances. I'm gonna show something to you right now.
Yeah, as you get that prepped up, the one somebody told me years ago, and this is when we're working like FDA projects, is that compliance and security are related, but they're not the same thing. You could be super secure and not compliant because you don't have policies or documentation or processes. You could also be really, really compliant and still have like a ton of security holes that are out there. So they're paired up and they're related, but they're not exactly the same thing. They serve different purposes. And then, along with Security Center, then you add on something if you're doing a lot of Microsoft 365 where you want Secure Score as well, which is a future topic we'll talk about. But they're all these things are related, and the more you do in the cloud and services, even stuff on-prem, you want to try and find the right mix to pull them all together. But more and more, we're at Microsoft Inspire and talking to the team there. Microsoft is looking at ways to find that the places where they do overlap or relate, that they can bond together well, but not in a place where it adversely affects their ability to be good at compliance or good at security. So, but they're doing a lot of great stuff. So, yeah, this is also a great slide, Rich, when you go through it, and we're probably close to our time.
Yeah. What we do at Microsoft in the way of security is we run our data centers in such a way that we can meet these compliances. So you can see regional, industry, U.S. government, global as the categorizations there. Once you start using these tools, you affect that compliance. Because if you're using them in an insecure way, policy and procedure-wise internally, or if your configurations aren't quite up to snuff, like you saw the recommendations in Security Center, you're not really compliant. And so I think that a really good way to get started again is to fire up Security Center, satisfy all the recommendations that it's giving you on there, and then you know that you have a rock solid environment from there. And then you're past the technical aspects of it, and then what you have to do is then apply controls to comply with these different acetations, I guess. It's not for the better word, security acetations that may take place. And that's, again, a great area that Agile IT can help you in, because they've done this before, and there's just no reason for companies having to start at square one in order to be compliant in a certain way. ISO 27001 is a real popular data center one, for example, and then we get into others for U.S. government, and SOX and HIPAA for healthcare, and you know, it just goes on and on and on. So again, I would say definitely rely on your partners for help in this area, and also our security center for any documentation we have or pointers, because these can be tremendous undertakings that can take a lot of time, and or it can be pretty easy if you can leverage resources that have done this before.